Okay, when I say Albert Einstein, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, right, it's that iconic image, the wild white hair, and of course that super famous equation.
Yep, you guessed it. E equals mc squared. It's got to be the most recognizable equation on the planet. But here's the thing. While it literally changed our world, it's just a tiny, tiny sliver of a much bigger, way more complicated, and honestly, a much more interesting story.
So is that the whole story? The equation and the hair? No way. Not even close. So let's really get into it, because the real story of Einstein, well, it's packed with surprises you probably never saw coming.
All right, so let's peel back the layers on that famous image. To really get who he was, we've got to go right back to the beginning. See, his revolutionary ideas didn't just appear out of nowhere. They grew from this incredible, deep-seated curiosity he had, right from the get-go.
Now this might sound like a pretty simple kid's question, right? What if I could ride a beam of light? But this wasn't just some random daydream. This was a profound thought experiment. And that ability, the power to just visualize the universe in these new ways, that was the very seed of all his greatest breakthroughs. And this is where you can really see the massive shift he created. I mean, before Einstein, physics was pretty clear. Mass, the physical stuff that makes up everything, and energy were two completely different things. End of story. Then he comes along and shows that nope, they're actually two sides of the same coin. He showed us that mass can be turned into a huge amount of energy. He didn't just adjust the old rules. He threw out the rule book and showed everyone a whole new game.
Okay, so the guy literally rewrites the laws of the universe. A Nobel Prize for his theory of relativity should be a total slam dunk, right? Well, here's another twist for you. The story of his Nobel Prize shows that things are almost never that simple.
So let me ask you, what do you think he won that 1921 Nobel Prize for? If you said relativity, you're not alone, but you'd actually be wrong.
Yeah, you heard me. He did not win the Nobel Prize for relativity. Why? Well, at the time, his biggest theory was just too out there. It was seen as too radical, too weird, and honestly, just too hard to prove. The Nobel Committee, they just weren't ready to go there yet.
So instead, he won for something called the photoelectric effect. This was his wild idea that light isn't just a wave, but it's also made of tiny little packets of energy. He called them quanta, but today we call them photons. Now, it wasn't as flashy as relativity, but it was rock solid, it was proven, and it cracked a huge puzzle in physics at the time. And the biggest irony of all? This very work helped create a theory he would end up fighting against for the rest of his life.
And that brings us to one of the biggest, most fascinating paradoxes in the history of science. The discovery that earned him a Nobel Prize, yeah, that same one, it became a founding pillar of quantum mechanics, a theory he would grow to absolutely hate.
Think about that. His concept of the photon was absolutely crucial for getting quantum physics off the ground. He literally helped start a revolution, and then he couldn't stand the revolutionary new world it revealed.
So what was the big disagreement? Well, it came down to this. Einstein believed the universe was orderly, beautiful, predictable. He was convinced that deep down everything was governed by elegant, certain laws. But quantum mechanics came along and said, not so fast. It described a subatomic world built on probability, uncertainty, and just pure random chance.
And his famous line really says it all. God does not play dice. He just couldn't bring himself to accept a universe that was fundamentally random. And so, in this incredible twist of fate, the man who helped kickstart the quantum revolution spent years as its most powerful and vocal critic.
But look, Einstein wasn't just a scientist locked away in some ivory tower. There's this whole other side to him that a lot of people forget. He was a deeply passionate activist.
I mean, when the Nazis took over in Germany, he didn't just sit back and watch. As a Jewish intellectual who cherished freedom, he fled. He took a stand. And when he got to America, he didn't just disappear into his studies at Princeton. No, he became a powerful voice against racism, speaking out for civil rights when that was a really tough and even dangerous thing to do. In fact, he was so outspoken that the FBI started a file on him, calling him a dangerous pacifist. Can you believe that?
And this quote of his just captures that spirit perfectly. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who do nothing. He truly believed that just standing by and letting bad things happen was a total moral failure. For him, speaking up wasn't a choice, it was a duty.
All right, so let's talk about his legacy and the final, massive dilemma of his life. Because his work isn't just something you read about in a history book. It is literally woven into the fabric of the world we live in today.
Just think about your daily life.
That GPS on your phone, it wouldn't work without his theory of relativity. Atomic energy, that's E equals mc squared in action, and all of our modern tech, computers, lasers, you name it, it's all built on the foundations of quantum mechanics, the very theory he could never fully accept. His legacy is, quite literally, everywhere you look.
But that brings us to the ultimate paradox. This is the one that really gets you. See, Einstein was a deeply committed pacifist his entire life. He hated war. He hated violence.
And yet, his most celebrated equation, E equals mc squared, gave humanity the scientific key to build the atomic bomb, the single most destructive weapon in history. And that fact, that contradiction, it would haunt him for the rest of his life.
He was absolutely terrified that the Nazis would build an atomic bomb first, and because of that fear, he signed a letter to President Roosevelt pushing him to start what would become the Manhattan Project. It was a decision he came to see as the single greatest mistake of his life, a choice made out of fear, one that he regretted until the day he died.
And so, his story leaves us with this huge, lingering question, one that's maybe more relevant today than ever. His life really forces us to confront it. How do we balance that relentless human drive to discover, to know more, with the massive weight of responsibility for what we create? You know, there's no simple answer, and maybe that's the most important thing Einstein left behind for us to think about.